Good afternoon, everyone. We will be starting in about 5 minutes. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jana Dupree, and let's get started about discussing documenting your summer feeding program, otherwise known as record keeping. Meal counting and claiming records are used in support of our summer feeding claims that are filed. Production records are optional in summer feeding, but are highly recommended. A sponsor must complete the daily meal count form for each meal served at the point of service, whether it is electronic or manual. Which will you decide to use, a software program, or will you be manual at the point of service? A sponsor must use a satellite form if the food is transported from one location to another, such as transporting food from the sponsor's central kitchen to a site location, or if you are transporting food from a food service management cooking location to another feeding site. Although production records are optional during the summer feeding program, it is highly recommended. This is a sample of our summer feeding production record. Our SFAs usually prefer to use their own production records, and that's just fine. Our PNP, our private nonprofit sponsors, may use this production record to document the number of meals prepared and served. The daily meal count form contains information that must be included for daily meal counts to be considered reimbursable. The sponsor will not be able to claim meals if the daily meal count form is incomplete. The daily meal count form may be accessed in the Summer Feeding Forms book, which is located on the CNP website. See Memo 20-47. A daily meal count form is incomplete and not eligible for reimbursement if there are missing hash marks. Please note that a sponsor will receive credit for the hash marks that are legible. Use hash marks, please, not circles, not squares, etc., to document the number of meals claimed on your daily meal count form. Strike-throughs or multiple numbers or designs on the daily meal count forms are not reimbursable. Adult meals included in the children's meal counts, whether it's first or second, are not reimbursable. If there are inconsistent or difficult meal documentations that's to be read by the reviewer, these may not be reimbursable. For example, using the daily meal count form for 2 meal types on the same form. No credit will be given for either meal. Remember, please, to circle the meal type you want to claim. Another example of ineligible claiming would be more meals documented as served than the number of meals available or delivered to the site. For example, you cannot serve 60 children if only 50 meals were delivered or prepared on site. Other areas of concern are the top portion of the daily meal count form is incomplete. The meal type was not circled. Delivery time was not listed. There's the missing date and signature of the supervisor. The daily meal count form was dated days after the meal service occurred. Now, this is important. Please do not use a daily meal count form from a previous year or another meal that was copied over. Someone used whiteout to block out the date and the signature on the form, and then added the current date and signature of the site supervisor. This is fraud. The sponsor could be terminated from the summer feeding program. When a site serves more than 150 children per day at a given meal service, as shown on the previous page, please use a supplemental page, which is page 2, to continue documenting additional number of children served. Staple or paperclip the sheets together. It may be a good idea to write the meal type on the top of page 2, just in case the pages become separated. Do not forget to list the name and the date of the meal that was served. Satellite forms. A sponsor must use a satellite form when food is transported from one location to another. You will hear that we're saying the same thing multiple times. We just don't want you to forget. Such as transporting food from the sponsor's central kitchen to a summer site, or transporting food from a food service management company to another feeding site. We have already discussed this on previous slide 2. The form must be completed in full prior to leaving the central kitchen by the sponsor or the food service management company representative. Upon arrival at the feeding location, the site supervisor and driver must complete their respective sections on the satellite form. This is a common finding during a summer review. Use the satellite form when the sponsor is transporting pre-portioned unitized meals to the feeding site location. Please remember, private nonprofit sponsors do not have the option of providing offer versus serve to children. Only the SFAs have been provided this option by USDA. There are several forms that are required to operate a good summer feeding program, which provides great documentation. This includes, but not limited to, the pre-operational visits that are conducted by the sponsor before the state agency conducts a pre-approval on new sites. The first 2-week visit is new to SFSP 2023 as a result of streamlining SFSP. Then there's the first 4-week review form known as the Food Service Site Review. There's the Racial Ethnic Data form, the Daily Meal Count form, the discrimination complaint form, which should be posted. Also, your Justice for All poster should be visible in a location in the dining area that anyone can see upon entry. The civil rights complaint form procedures should be available in the dining area or posted. The satellite forms should be available if applicable. Timesheets should be available for administrative and/or site staff that are paid from the SFSP budget. Mileage records for administrative and/or staffs if applicable. Public or media release. Documentation of training. This includes the agenda, sign-in sheet, any backup documentation used to present the training. Remember to train staff prior to the start of the job. You should have the letter to the health department. Please post a health inspection and permit to operate in a visible location in the dining area prior to program operations. Media release. Examples of media release are your Facebook, sponsor, website, local newspaper, etc. These are common findings that we have cited or the contractor has cited during a summer feeding review. Racial ethnic data form. USDA has changed compliance regulations regarding documenting racial ethnic data. Now, a sponsor must capture the data by using alternate methods. The requirement to end the practice of visual identification was effective as of May 17, 2021. FNS discourages asking a child to self-identify their race and ethnicity, as this practice must be confusing to young children. Although state agencies and program operators may wish to collect the data, it may be difficult to obtain. Try to obtain the information, providing the racial ethnic data is voluntary to program participants. Remember, the staff member completing the form must not question children as to their origins of their ethnicity or race. This must be completed without involving any children participating in the summer feeding program. If it is not feasible to obtain the racial or an ethnic data from the parents or school systems due to the nature of the program, list unknown under racial and ethnic categories. Additional resources may be found in FNS instructions and policy memos with questions and answers. Records that support your food service costs in the summer feeding program are food inventories, delivery receipts for vended meals if applicable, payroll, time and attendance records for administrative and site personnel, and purchase invoices. This page lists the records to support funds accruing to your summer feeding program. Site records of cash collected, copies of receipts given for cash donations, records of any other funds received for the summer food service program, such as advances and/or reimbursements received by the LDOE. These are also questions that will be asked during your summer feeding review and among common findings. This page provides a continuation of documentation to support a good summer feeding program. Other records may include, if applicable, an agreement with schools to furnish meals, contract with the food service management company, bid procedures, records and inventories of USDA donated foods, records of training conducted, menu records, receipts, invoices, and bills for all rented or purchased items and services that are in your budget line items, bank statements and deposit slips, accounting ledgers, sanitation and health reports, certification of independent price determination, the food service management contract, beneficiary data, food donations, procurement procedures and a procurement plan, written standards of conduct, and all sponsor procedures which reflect the summer feeding program operations. Remember, private nonprofits do not have the option to utilize offer versus serve starting with summer 2023. Therefore, you must maintain daily counts and records of the amount of milk you purchased, the actual amount of milk that was delivered and received at the site, the amount of milk used at each meal service, and the amount of milk left over at the end of the last meal service. Please maintain the daily count of completed first and second meals served to children. Remember, you cannot include adult meals in the children's counts, whether it is the first or second meal served. Daily count of meals served to program and non-program adults. Daily count of disallowed meals, such as maybe a drop meal or spoiled meals, and daily count of excess meals. Now we're going to go into viability, capability, and accountability evaluations and management plans, which is new to summer feeding.
This is Helen Folks, and I'll be covering the VCA, and that's how we'll refer to it moving forward in terms of viability, capability, and accountability evaluations, and also management plans, which this section is new to the Summer Food Service Program. There were portions that were included in the application for participation and in other areas. However, there are new sections starting in 2023. Now, what does VCA stand for, and what are the required budget sections? VCA stands for financial viability, administrative capability, and program accountability. And budgets include the Summer Food Service Program operating budget and also the Summer Food Service Program administrative budget. So let's talk about why VCA requirements were put into place for SFSP. Financial viability standards were put in place to ensure that sponsoring organizations are both qualified and capable of running the Summer Food Service Program. The ability to generate and maintain sufficient income must be evidenced in the sponsoring organization's records. The sponsoring organization must also demonstrate that its financial management system is in compliance with 2 CFR 200.302 and all SFSP nonprofit food service requirements. Financial management policies and procedures must be documented and demonstrated in an organization's practice to ensure a prospective sponsor's fiscal responsibility and ability to maintain fiscal integrity for the Summer Food Service Program. Examples of supporting documents for ensuring that the state agency or reviewers can establish financial viability for an organization and is included in this chart on the slide. The following chart displays examples of supporting documents that can be used to assist an organization with that demonstration. The information is broken down into 3 categories based on the size of the business. For example, a small company with $250,000 or less in income would need to provide tax returns, income and expense tracking data, bank statements, grant award letters, organization-wide budgets, written financial management policies and procedures, and positive net assets or equity. Now, a medium-sized company that earns between $251,000 and $749,000 would also have to provide internally generated financial statements. Now, a larger company, meaning those that receive more than $750,000 or more each year, would additionally have to provide audit reports to the Department of Education on an annual basis. Some examples of best practices will be discussed next. A best practice is a method or technique that is considered superior to alternative procedures because it more consistently produces results that meet program requirements. Some best practices related to financial viability include the use of a financial professional with sound business experience, financial grant experience, and/or programmatic experience. Also, relying on historical data to assist with budgeting is very important, and a best practice. Also, monthly reporting of financial records with periodic evaluation by a board of directors or a school board would also be helpful. Periodic assessment of the program budget as well as the fiscal plan for the entire organization would be required, and also access to multiple other sources of funding that are not limited in usability or have specifically designated usage in grant language is very helpful in ensuring that all program costs are covered. Federal regulations at 7 CFR Part 225.14C1 require that all institutions applying for participation in the summer food service program submit information sufficient to document that the institution is financially and administratively capable of operating the summer food service program. Now, there are 3 performance standards that are required of SFSP sponsors under viability, capability, and accountability measures, and as well as in terms of program accountability. The state agency must deny any applications that do not meet all of those standards. The state agency must consider past performance in the summer food service program or another child nutrition program, and any other factors it deems relevant when determining whether the sponsor's application meets performance standards, which would be required for approval. Under Performance Standard 1 for financial viability and financial management, a sponsor must be financially viable. The sponsor must expend and account for program funds consistent with the referenced part of FNS Instruction 796-4, Financial Management in the Summer Food Service Program, and also 2 CFR Part 200 Subpart D, as well as USDA regulations at 2 CFR Parts 400 and 415. Again, under Performance Standard 1, under Part 1, the sponsor's management plan must first justify the need for the summer food service program in a given area. And this question will ask that you describe the community's need for summer meals and describe your recruitment strategies. It's important to explain how a sponsor's participation will help ensure the delivery of program benefits to otherwise unserved sites or children, and also describe how the sponsor will recruit sites consistent with any state agency requirements. Under Performance Standard 1, under Parts 2 and 3, the second part indicates that the sponsor must show that they have adequate funds available to operate the program, pay employees and suppliers during periods of temporary interruptions or delays in program payments, and also pay debts if fiscal claims are assessed against the sponsor. In terms of documentation, it's important to provide audit documents, financial statements, and other documentation for demonstration of financial viability. Under Part 3, it's important to ensure that all costs in the sponsor's budget are necessary, reasonable, allowable, and appropriately documented. Just let me go back to this slide for just a moment. It's important to keep in mind when working with federal program funds that all SFSP funds must be adequately separated from any other child nutrition program funds. And also from any other organizational funds. So adequate separation is a very critical part of showing the state agency that you're in compliance with appropriate documentation of financial data. Under Performance Standard 2, Administrative Capability, the sponsor must be administratively capable. Appropriate and effective management practices must be in place to ensure that program operations meet federal requirements. To demonstrate administrative capability, the sponsor must have an adequate number and type of qualified staff to ensure the compliant operation of the program, and have written policies and procedures that assign program responsibilities and duties, as well as ensure compliance with civil rights requirements. Under Performance Standard 3, accountability, the sponsor must have internal controls and other management systems in place to ensure fiscal accountability and operation of the program. To demonstrate program accountability, the sponsor must show that all funds and property received are handled with fiscal integrity and accountability and used only for authorized program purposes. All expenses are incurred with integrity and accountability and result only from authorized purposes. Claims will be processed accurately and in a timely fashion. Funds and property are properly safeguarded and used, and expenses are incurred for authorized program purposes only. A system of safeguards and controls will be in place to prevent and detect improper financial activities by employees and volunteers. Okay, so under Performance Standard 3, the sponsor must maintain appropriate records to document compliance with program requirements, including approved budgets and amendments, accounting records, management plans, and include daily records of site operations. Okay, shifting now to the management plan. The state agency must require the submission of a management plan to determine compliance with performance standards established under the management plan section at 7 CFR 225.6E. So our next slides are going to cover requirements for new sponsors and sponsors that have experienced significant operational problems in the prior year. Also included will be requirements for experienced sponsors. Requirements for school food authorities in good standing in the National School Lunch Program or School Breakfast Program will also be covered. In terms of new sponsors and those with significant operational problems in the past year must submit a complete management plan that includes detailed information on the sponsor's management and administrative structure, including information that demonstrates the sponsor's financial viability and financial management processes. Information that demonstrates compliance with each of the 3 performance standards outlined in regulations must be clear, and those were covered in the prior slides. A list or description of staff assigned to perform program monitoring required under 7 CFR 225.15 D2 and 3 must also be included. As part of the management plan, sponsors must provide adequate and not less than annual training of sponsor staff and sponsored sites. This training must occur prior to anyone beginning SFSP program work. Sponsors must perform monitoring to ensure that all site operations are accountable and appropriate, accurately classify sites consistent with program regulations, demonstrate the sponsor's compliance with meal service, record keeping, and other operational requirements, provide meals that meet the USDA Summer Food Service Program meal pattern requirements, comply with applicable state and local health and sanitation requirements, comply with civil rights requirements, maintain complete and appropriate records on file, and claim reimbursement only for eligible meals served to children. Now, in reference to meal pattern requirements, school food authorities are allowed to utilize the NSLP or SBP meal patterns and utilize offer versus serve. However, non-school food authority sponsors must use those USDA Summer Food Service Program meal patterns. SFAs and CACFP sponsors in good standing that are planning to participate in SFSP also have certain requirements. So those in good standing in the National School Lunch Program, School Breakfast Program, or CACFP are required to submit a management plan, and the state agency may request additional evidence of financial and administrative capability sufficient to ensure that the school food authority or institution has the ability and resources to operate the program. Now, in conclusion of this part, the Summer Food Service Program budget aligns with VCA performance standards. Acceptable VCA performance may be reflected in the budget in the areas of financial viability, administrative capability, and accountability. In terms of financial viability, successful performance will be illustrated as a positive relationship between revenue and expenses. Under the area of administrative capability, the budget and records held on site for review, in addition to on-site performance, will demonstrate whether the organization possesses the skill set required for running a business in the SFSP program. In terms of accountability, the organization must demonstrate the ability to record, track, and report key information, including the forecasting and adjustments made to budgets. This accountability performance is also reflected in annual financial and end-of-the-year budget reporting of the Summer Food Service Program, with demonstration of adequate separation from non-Summer Food Service Program functions of the organization. Budgets in VCA areas must show that organizational procedures result in using reasonable, necessary, and allocable determinations when it comes to expenditure of SFSP program funds, and observable performance in providing quality meals to eligible children that are forecasted, produced, served, and claimed in a manner which demonstrates responsibility, monitoring adjustments, and accuracy in reporting. I did want to emphasize that the management plan, there are several portions of the management plan that will be included in the 2023 Summer Food Service Program online application, and it will be included as a series of questions that sponsors will then attest to at the end of the application. So in order to streamline that process, we did include that as part of the online application. For any questions related to today's training, please contact the Louisiana Department of Education, Division of Nutrition Support at Child Nutrition Programs at la.gov. Also, you may contact the state agency at 225-342-9661. So someone was asking through chat, do we have to turn in all of those financial documents as part of the SFSP application? And that's a very good question. New sponsors or prospective sponsors, I should say, do have to complete a checklist of documents for submission to the state agency prior to participation. In order to access that list, please go to the Child Nutrition Program's website, go to Memos and Resources, then go to Summer Food Service Program, and under the Resource section, you will find a heading of 2023 Summer Food Service Program Materials. Under that area, you'll find a checklist of documents, and there's a PDF of that checklist and also a jot form that you can use to actually submit all of that documentation. Now, anyone interested in the program, just getting started, should access the request for information that is in that same resources section and submit that to nutrition support through child nutrition programs at la.gov. If you fill out the jot form itself, it submits directly to us, and then we will reply with an email about all of the requirements of the program. Now, if you have already been approved for the program in the past, as long as you haven't had a gap year in participation, then your documentation should be all the way, fully received. If you do require a VCA evaluation or a management plan, the state agency will reach out to you for technical assistance visits and to discuss the requirements. So, but anyone who is interested in checking that checklist of documentation can go to the CNP website and take a look, because it is consistent documentation with our VCA evaluation. At this time, I don't see any further questions in chat, but please do get in contact with us using the information on this slide. If you would like some additional information about record keeping or the VCA or management plan. And thank you so much, everyone, for participating today and for your attention. And have a good afternoon.